When you think of great classic Sonic games, what comes to mind? Sonic 2 on Genesis, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, Sonic CD, even Sonic Mania? But do any of the 8-bit games cross your mind? Any of the Master System or Game Gear releases? Probably not. But what if I told you there was a Sega Game Gear game that I would say is just as good as the Sega Genesis Sonic games? Today we're looking at Sonic Triple Trouble for the Sega Game Gear. A game that I admittedly do have a little bit of a history with. Now, I didn't play this on real hardware until a couple years ago when I bought a Game Gear for myself, but this was the first game I ever downloaded from the 3DS Virtual Console, and I was hooked. For lack of a better term, it was a true hidden gem, and a Sonic game that I was surprised that nobody except Some Call Me Johnny had been talking about. This is Sonic Triple Trouble, one of my favorite Sonic games of all time. And today on Stuff We Play, I'm going to be telling you why I think it's such a great game. Welcome to Stuff We Play, home of everything weird and retro, and if that sounds cool to you, why not subscribe? And today we're taking a look at Sonic Triple Trouble. Of the 8-bit Sonic games we've been looking at, this is the only one to not have gotten an official Sega Master System port, but we're still looking at a Master System version. This game may have been only released on the Game Gear, and I can understand why. At this point, all the Sonic games, sans Sonic 1, had only gotten Master System releases in Europe and Brazil. But thanks to fans, this game was ported to the Master System. But is this great game better on a handheld or on a console? Well, that's what we're going to find out in today's review. The story here is actually pretty interesting. Triple Trouble refers to the fact that there are 3 villains in this game. The big bad, of course, is once again Dr. Robotnik, who, well, he's up to no good. And joining him this time is Knuckles, who once again has been duped into following the Mad Doctor like he was in Sonic 3, and a new character named Mac the Weasel, or Fang the Sniper, depending on your territory. The story here is Dr. Robotnik is once again seeking out the 6 Chaos Emeralds. Yes, only 6. I guess they didn't want to program in a 7th because that would mean they'd have to put in Supersonic, wouldn't it? And Robotnik wants to power up his most terrible creation yet, the Atomic Destroyer. They don't really give us much details as to what that is, but from the sounds of it, it sounds like an atom bomb. However, Robotnik's smartened up this time. He knows that Sonic can pretty easily kick his ass, especially with Tails by his side once again. So he enlists the help of Knuckles, who goes and torments Sonic through various means such as dropping snow on him or setting him on fire, and Fang the Weasel Sniper person, or whatever his name is, who will actually go out and try to fight you for the Chaos Emeralds. And that's one thing that really makes this interesting. Sonic Chaos was the first of the Game Gear games to have proper special stages, but Triple Trouble actually does them right. Getting to the special stages is pretty simple. In every single non-boss act of every zone, there will be an emerald container. If you hit the emerald container with 50 rings, then some stars will appear above it, and jump into the stars to be taken to the special stages. Now there's 2 different types of special stages, and each of them have 2 sections. The first type of special stage is some sort of maze challenge, and these are actually really cool. And the second type is an airplane special stage, kind of like you'd find in some of the Sonic Advance games. There's only 5 of these, as Robotnik himself has the 6th Chaos Emerald. And after getting through each special stage, you'll then have an exclusive boss fight with Mac the Fang Weasel Sniper himself. Most of these fights are pretty easy, but they're still really cool, and this is an entire part of the game that you're missing out on by not going for the Chaos Emeralds. Admittedly, it isn't too hard to find the monitors, but it's still an incentive to go through and explore these stages, which are even bigger and vaster than in any of the previous Game Gear games. Speaking of all the levels here, they look great. This is definitely the best looking of the Game Gear games yet, and it looks especially great on the Master System version where you have the added screen real estate. From vibrant sunsets to twisting loops, everything you'd want out of a Sonic game is here, and it's really cool how all these zones are laid out as well. I find all the zones to be particularly memorable in the music zone as well. From Turquoise Hill to Robotnik Winter to even Meta Junglera, all the music here is wonderful, and all the zones here seem very original. Once again though, a lot of these stages have gimmicks, but thankfully they're done a lot better than Sonic 2 on Game Gear. Once again, the underwater levels have bubble mazes and tubes, but they seem to be quite a bit better designed here. They aren't nearly as infuriating as merely touching a wall won't pop your bubble. Speaking of the underwater levels, for some reason Tails can pilot a submarine in these. I don't know why they gave Tails a submarine, but it's cool and it can fire torpedoes, and it makes this Knuckles boss fight really a breeze. By the way, the boss fights. Perhaps my favorite is the one in Sunset Park Act 3. Sunset Park Act 3 is actually special in general. Once you go past the signpost at the end of Sunset Park Act 2, the signpost falls through the ground, and the train takes off, transitioning you perfectly into Sunset Park Act 3. This is also the only auto-scrolling zone here, but it's such fast scrolling that it's not nearly as bothersome as in Bridge Zone and Sonic 1 on Master System and Game Gear. And then the boss here is really cool as well. You're literally fighting a train. So it's giving me a weird Bubsy vibe, or perhaps even a Mirage Saloon vibe. The bosses here aren't too terribly difficult, but they are definite tests of skill. For example, the boss of Turquoise Hill Act 3 takes advantage of one of Sonic's new abilities. When Sonic's thrown up in the air off a cliff or by a spring, he's known as ball. By pressing the attack button in the air, you can temporarily fall into your ball form and thus deal damage to enemies. This is great in faster levels as you can quickly react to enemies while in the air, and it's definitely used great here, teaching you through level design. I can really get behind that. Tails, once again, unlike Sonic, can fly, though you can only do it from a standstill once again, but it's so much easier and quicker to execute regardless, that's still very useful. Sonic, however, just has a spin dash, run, and jump, though I swear he seems a bit faster than Tails. I also really appreciate the small cutscenes here. There aren't tons of them, but it's great, especially when you get into the final level of the game. Look at that! Holy crap, Metal Sonic's flying after me. Granted, the boss fight's not too difficult, but holy crap, that was so cool the first time I saw it. And then once you defeat Robotnik, you kick his ass, you make him fall into a pit and potentially die, and then you actually make up with Knuckles. Seriously, this is good 8-bit storytelling here. Sonic and Knuckles shaking hands at the end of the game and flying off together. Yeah, it's not deep or anything, but it's still cool, and it's more story than we've gotten in any of the 8-bit games so far. Yes, there's still a bad ending where Knack Weasel, whatever he's called, taunts you with all the emeralds you didn't grab, but the good ending where you fly off into the sunset is still rewarding enough to warrant seeking them out. But thankfully the bad ending isn't nearly as bad as Tails dying like in Sonic 2 on Game Gear. This is a great game, and it's definitely the fastest and most beautiful of all the Sonic games on Game Gear yet, and I dare say it's even better in the Master System version. The game never felt particularly cramped in the Game Gear version, probably because it was designed from the ground up for the Game Gear, but the added screen real estate is definitely appreciated, though it does lead to a few glitches, such as Knuckles appearing randomly on the side of the screen during the intro, and the title screen and character select screen still being in the Game Gear screen size. Besides that, it still looks great, and I'd say it's definitely the definitive version of the game. It's just a shame that it's not official. My Game Gear copy of the game only costs about $5 or $6. But if you do want a Master System reproduction cartridge, that's probably going to run you about $30. After all, it is an actual reproduction cartridge that's being made for you. But I love this game. It's a fantastic game, and I'd say it's worth playing if you're a fan of the Genesis games. Even if the previous Game Gear and Master System games weren't doing it for you, this one may be worth checking out. What are your favorite Sonic games? Let me know down in the comment section below, along with your memories with them. And while you're at it, why don't you subscribe to Stuff We Play for more great content like this. If you really want to go the extra mile, I should mention, why not support us on Patreon? Because every dollar earned from Patreon goes back into the channel itself. So with that, thank you very much for watching. Stay classy, and I'll see you next time.